In 1981, a young Daniel West at the age of 22 stood outside the grand gates of Columbia University, New York, his first step into the world of economics. As time moves forward, so does he, climbing through lecture halls and boardrooms until he earns his place among Wall Street's elite in the early 90s. Hey designers! In this video, we're going to create a documentary-style scene in After Effects. It's a really simple tutorial if you follow along step by step. So, let's get started. First, we'll create a new composition. I'm using a 1920 by 1080 resolution. Next, let's import our files. These are the elements we'll be using in the design, and I've already saved them beforehand. If you want to download these files for practice, I've added a link in the description. We'll start by importing the building PNG. Drag and drop it onto the timeline. Turn this layer into a 3D layer. If you don't see the 3D options, just press F4. Pressing F4 switches between layer modes and switches. Once that's done, adjust the position of the building layer. Now, let's adjust its size. Select the layer, press S on your keyboard to bring up the scale settings, and resize it to fit your design. Now, let's change our view layout. Switch from one view to two views. If you want to change any of these, just click on the view name and choose from options like front, top, back, right, or bottom. You'll notice a blue frame around one of the views. This means that view is currently selected. Set both views to full zoom so you can see everything clearly. Now go ahead and fine-tune the Z position of the building layer. Adjust its Z position to push it back in 3D space. You can do this by either dragging the arrows in the preview window or changing the values manually in the position settings. And again, use S to scale it up so it covers the whole canvas. Once we've set the scale and position of the building layer, it's time to bring in the next element, the back view of the person. So, let's import that image. Drag and drop it onto the timeline above the building layer. Now, make this layer 3D as well. After that, press S for scale and scale it down to fit the scene properly. Then, adjust its position, move the Y position to move it slightly downward, so it looks better in the frame. Once you're happy with the position, close the layer's properties to keep things tidy. Now, let's create a new camera layer. You can copy the camera settings. Just hit OK. Next, we'll create a new null object. This is where we'll make all the animation changes, and we'll parent the camera to this null object so that the camera follows the null's movement. Make the null to 3D. Select the camera layer and look for its parent pick whip, a little swirl icon. Drag it onto the null1 layer. This means any changes we make to the null object will also affect the camera. Now, why do we do this? Because animating through a null object gives us more control over the movement and flexibility to tweak things easily. Let's animate the camera movement now. Select the null1 layer and press P to bring up the position. Click the stopwatch icon next to position to set the first keyframe. Now, move the time indicator a few seconds forward, I'm going with the 8-second mark, and add a blank keyframe there. Then, move the line indicator back to the first frame, and from here, we'll start adjusting the camera's Z position to pull it backward. Also, adjust the Y position slightly to raise the camera's view upward. You can do this manually in two ways, either by dragging the arrows in the preview window or by changing the numeric values in the timeline. I'll do both to show you that either method works. Adjust the Z position a little more to pull the camera back and tweak the Y position so it starts from a higher angle. Now, when you preview the animation, you'll notice that it starts blank and slowly reveals the building, followed by the person. Lastly, let's adjust the scale of the building again. Select the building layer, press S for scale, and increase the size a bit more so it fully covers the canvas. If you don't want the camera animation to stay stationary, here's what we can do. First, move the time indicator to the last keyframe. Then drag this keyframe a little further down the timeline. Let's place it at the 10-second mark for now. At this new point, while the time indicator is there, click to add a blank keyframe. Now, select all the keyframes and press F9 to easy ease them for smoother animation. You can also shift the last keyframe even further if you want a slower and longer motion. With all the keyframes selected, go to the graph editor. If your graph doesn't look like mine, right-click inside the graph area and choose Edit Speed Graph. Double-click this keyframe and set both the incoming and outgoing influence to 60. Now, double-click second keyframe and set both the incoming and outgoing influence to 65. Also, check the continuous option and hit OK. Next, click and move the curve handles. Lift the middle keyframe slightly upward to form a smooth curve. Move the last keyframe's curve handle further to stretch out the motion. Slightly adjust the second keyframe to shape a nice sliding curve. Lift the middle keyframe slightly upward to form a smooth curve. Zoom in and fine-tune the curve so it flows smoothly. Go back and preview the animation. You'll see that the camera is no longer stationary, it's moving through the scene. Now let's import the tree. This tree will act as the transition point in our scene. Drag and drop it onto the timeline. The tree appears quite green and doesn't really match the overall tone of our composition. Go to Effects and Presets and search for Lumetri Color. Apply it to the tree layer. Open the Basic Correction section and adjust the colors, increase the temperature, and also increase the tint. This will warm up the colors and make them match the scene better. It looks much more fitting. Make this tree layer 3D. Press P for position and change the Z position to bring it forward in the scene. Adjust the X position as well to move it slightly to the right. We don't want the tree to be fully visible right at the start, just gradually entering the scene. Let's preview the animation now. You'll see the tree slowly moving into view. If you feel like the animation becomes too slow later on, you can always speed it up by selecting the keyframes and moving them closer together. Let's preview again. That's looking much better now. With that done, duplicate the first null by pressing Ctrl+D. Select the duplicated null, press P for position, and remove all the existing keyframes by clicking once on the position stopwatch. Next, we'll parent null 1 to null 2. Grab the pick whip from null 1 and drop it onto null 2. This way, we can control all animation of null 1 through null 2, giving us more flexibility. Move the time indicator to the 10-second mark, or anywhere that shows both the building and the person clearly. Click the position stopwatch on null 2 to add a keyframe. Move the time indicator a few frames forward, then adjust the X position to move the scene sideways, so the tree comes fully into view on the right side. This gives us the transition effect we want. Once that's done, select both keyframes and press F9 to ease them for smoother animation. Now let's preview the entire animation to see how it looks with everything in place. If you feel like the animation is a bit too slow, you can easily fix that by moving the keyframes closer to the first one, just like this. Now preview the animation again. This is already looking much better. But let's fine-tune it even more. The movement is happening a little too early, so let's select the keyframes of null 2 again and move them slightly further along the timeline. Just a little bit more. Alright, now it's time to import the sky layer. Drag and drop it onto the timeline. This is a large sky image, so first, select it and make it 3D. Then, go to its Z position and move it far into the background. Adjust the Y position as well to remove any black gaps at the top or bottom of the screen. Let's preview the animation now. You'll notice everything is coming together beautifully. This is looking really nice. Now we're going to add the text. Select the text tool and, on the first keyframe, type the year you want to display. Make this text layer 3D as well. Adjust its Z position to push it into the scene, and then shift its Y position to bring it up so it's clearly visible. Press S for scale, and make the text larger as needed. Feel free to tweak the X, Y, and Z positions until it sits exactly where you want it. Once the position feels right, preview the animation again. Perfect. It's sitting in the scene just the way we want. Now we're ready to animate the text, so let's do that next. Go to the Effects and Presets panel and search for Slider Control. Once you find it, apply the Slider Control effect to the text layer. Next, select the text layer, and in the timeline search bar, type source text to easily locate that property. Now, hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and click the stopwatch icon next to source text. This will open the expression editor. Grab the Pick Whip icon and drag it onto the slider control to link the source text with the slider. So what we are going to do now is click on the stopwatch next to slider so that it starts animating. Now, when we change the slider value, you'll notice that the text is also changing based on the slider. After that, move the bar indicator a few frames and now change the value of the slider to 1981. I want it to animate from the first number to 1981. And when you preview it now, you're going to see that the numbers are animating like a countdown, but they are animating with the decimal points. But we want the numbers to animate in full numbers only, not in decimals. So we'll remove the decimals using an expression. It's very easy to remove them, just a small line of code. Click on the expression box where we link the source text with the slider using Pick Whip. Click on it once, and now, at the very beginning of this code, we are going to write math, then put a dot, then write round, then open the bracket, which is the round bracket. Now leave the left bracket here as it is and remove the last right bracket. Now again, write a right bracket at the end of the expression. Now click anywhere in the composition to apply the expression. Now it looks way better and clean. So let's apply a few effects on the text layer to make it look more cinematic and engaging. First of all, select the text layer, then go to Effects and Presets and search for Glow. Apply the glow effect on the text layer. Once it's applied, increase the threshold to control how much of the text glows. After that, increase the glow radius and glow intensity so that it really pops out. You can also change the color A and color B to any colors that you like, maybe a bit of blue or orange depending on your scene and style. Now, we will also add a drop shadow to give some depth to the text. So again, go to Effects and Presets and search for drop shadow. Apply it on the text layer. Increase the distance if you want the shadow to spread more. This way, the shadow looks sharp and bold. Okay, now we will prepare the transition with the elevator PNG. I have cut out the doors of the elevator and saved them as separate PNG files so that we can use them whenever we want. And import them. Drag and drop all of them onto the timeline. Now we want to keep things organized, so let's change the color of all three PNG layers to blue. This will help us identify that these three belong to the elevator. Select this Null 2 layer. Press the U key on your keyboard so that all the keyframes become visible. Move the bar indicator to the last keyframe where the final position has been set. Select this main door layer. At this exact point where the bar indicator is on the last keyframe, press Ctrl plus Home. This will bring the anchor point of the main door layer right to the center of the composition, so it perfectly aligns in the middle at that specific time. Now preview the animation and watch closely. You will notice that a few parts of the elevator are already visible in the frame, and we don't want that just yet. So in order to hide or mask those parts of the elevator properly, we will use a matting method. To do this, we will take the pen tool and draw a shape on the left side of the tree. The shape should cover half of the tree from the left side, basically hiding any part of the elevator that we don't want to be visible initially. Once you draw the shape, this will automatically create a shape layer 1. Now make this shape layer 1 a 3D layer by clicking on the 3D icon next to it. Next, select the tree layer. Press the P key on your keyboard to reveal its position values. Copy the position values by pressing Ctrl plus C. Select Shape. Layer 1, press P to open its position and paste the copied values by pressing Ctrl plus V. Right now, both the shape and the tree are in the same position. So we just need to change the X position of the shape layer 1. Move the shape to the left side of the tree so that it covers that portion where the elevator is appearing early. Now, when you preview the animation, you will see that the shape is hiding part of the elevator. We need to apply Track Matte to the main door layer. So select the main door layer. If you are not seeing the Track Matte column, simply press F4 on your keyboard. This will toggle the layer switches and reveal the Track Matte options. Under the Track Matte drop-down of the main door, change it Shape Layer 1. Now click on the small icon next to it to make sure it is inverted. Now the matte is applied, and it will only reveal the main door once it comes out from behind the tree, giving a much cleaner animation. And you will see that everything is looking smooth and the elevator door appears exactly when it's supposed to. At this point where Null 2 is at its last keyframe, we're going to slightly adjust this keyframe. The goal is to move it a bit so that the tree layer is no longer visible at this frame. Now select the main door layer. Press P to reveal the position values and adjust the X position so that the door perfectly comes to the center of the frame. Once you do that, take a look. You'll notice that some of the underlying layers or unwanted elements are peeking through from the sides. To fix that, press S to open the Scale property. Increase the scale of this main door layer just enough so that nothing from behind is visible anymore. This will make sure the frame is clean and visually correct. Now it's a good time to preview the whole animation again from the beginning. Watch it fully and carefully, and check if anything looks off or if all the layers are moving as expected. If everything looks smooth and perfect, then we are ready to move on. We don't need the right door and left door layers anymore. We were only using the main door in the animation. So let's just hide both the right door and the left door layers by clicking on the eyeball icon next to them in the layer panel. You can also close all the open properties of these layers to keep your timeline neat and organized. Now we are going to import the person image or video into the scene. Once it's imported, drag and drop it onto the timeline. As soon as it's placed, press S to reveal the scale property and scale it down to fit the scene. Adjust the position of the person as needed. Make this person layer a 3D layer. After that, if you want the person to snap to the center of the composition, press Ctrl-Home on the keyboard. Or, if you prefer manual adjustment, you can move the X position of the person to place it where you want them to stand. Then fine-tune the Y position to align it with the floor or base. Once the person's position looks right, we need to build a background wall behind them. For that, we'll import a background layer that we'll use to create the walls. So import the background layer into the project. Make it a 3D layer as well by clicking on the 3D cube icon next to it. Select this BG layer, and in the search bar of the timeline, type Orientation. Once you see the orientation property, change the Y orientation value to 90 degrees. This will rotate the layer sideways, making it look like a vertical wall. Or, if it's hard to understand the placement visually, you can change your layout from one view to two views by clicking on the drop-down at the top of the composition panel. This helps a lot in positioning 3D layers. Choose Top View for the left side, which makes it easier to move things in 3D space. Press P again and change the X position, moving it to the left side of the person to make it look like a wall behind them. Then press S to bring up the scale, and scale it down just for now, only to better visualize how the layout is being formed. Later, we will scale it back up. Once the position feels right, we're going to duplicate this layer to form the right wall. To do that, press Ctrl+D on the keyboard while the BG layer is selected. Now you have another copy of it. Move the X position of this new copy to the right side of the person. So now we have walls on both sides. Now duplicate the layer one more time by pressing Ctrl+D again. This time, we need to make it a flat background behind the person instead of a sidewall. So select this new layer, go to the search bar again, and type Orientation. In the orientation settings, change the Y orientation back to 0, because we don't want this one turned sideways. Press P to bring up the position property of this layer, and slightly move the Z position backwards so it sits behind the person, forming the background wall. Adjust the X and Y positions as well to perfectly align it behind the scene. Once you're satisfied with the placement, you can see how all the background layers are forming a 3D space behind the character. Now select all these BG layers that we've created: the left wall, right wall, and the back wall. Then press P for position. Use the Z position to move all these layers backwards in space slightly so they're not interfering with the front objects. Scale them up if needed by adjusting the scale values so they cover the area properly. After scaling them up, you can fine-tune the positions, whether it's the back wall or the side walls. Just move them as per your composition layout until they feel right. You can see how the space looks now the walls surround the person, giving the scene a full background environment. I scaled the walls down initially and worked step by step only to show you each adjustment clearly, so that it's easier to understand what's happening in the 3D layout. When the animation plays, you'll notice that the background walls we created earlier are now becoming visible through the mask area. Since we only want a portion of the scene to be visible, we will need to apply track matte to these background layers as well. To fix this, select all of the BG layers that form the background. This includes the left wall, right wall, and the back wall. First, we need to trim these layers so that they only appear when needed. To do that, press Alt plus the left square bracket key on the keyboard. This trims the layers from the point where your timeline bar is placed. After trimming the layers, keep them selected. Then go to the Track Matte section of the timeline. Under the Track Matte column, change the option from No Track Matte to Shape Layer 1. You will also need to click the small checkbox icon next to the Alpha Matte to invert the matte properly. When you preview the animation again, you'll see that the background is no longer leaking outside the masked area, and everything looks neat and clean. And with that, your animation is complete. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please like the video, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Ace Designs for more helpful content like this. In 1981, a young Daniel West at the age of 22 stood outside the grand gates of Columbia University, New York, his first step into the world of economics. As time moves forward, so does he, climbing through lecture halls and boardrooms until he earns his place among Wall Street's elite in the early 90s.